Well, good morning. Welcome back. Good to be with everyone again on a Tuesday for Breakfast with Bill. One of my favorite times of the week is we get to share some of our experiences and coaching and some of the growth we do throughout the week. And it's always good to be with Matt. So Matt, so glad to have you back. We're on a roll 2 weeks in a row,
Yeah, how about that? I need another vacation.
huh? It's about that time. Why, Matt? Why do you need a vacation?
Yeah,
I
I
want to
mean
answer that.
it's lessening a little bit working from home. I don't know why, but yeah, it's great to be here. Always enjoy it. Tuesdays aren't the same for me when I'm not on Breakfast with Bill.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, we're going to talk this week a little bit about our questionings. And for some of you, you probably thought that was an aggressive question I asked, Matt, of why? Why do you need another vacation? And it was intentional. And it was because the types of questions we ask lead to the types of answers we get and the type of relationships we build. And I recently was going through a new certification on emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I learned in that process was that the questions we ask are an indicator of our level of emotional intelligence. And what I learned was those people that ask why questions, questions that begin with why, tend to have a little lower level of emotional intelligence, and it indicates less self-regulation. And the reason for that is when we ask why questions, we put people on defense. We make people feel as though we might be attacking them. And it's very biological the way that happens. Because when we ask why questions of someone, we actually trigger certain emotional biological responses. So today we want to talk about the power of our why questions and think about how do we transition maybe to more what and how questions and how we use those both in the sales process, how we can use those as a leader, and how we can use those to influence our relationships.
hmm And as you talk about probably biology and psychology, I'll pull it back into sales. As you mentioned, it shows one's I'd say emotional intelligence aptitude. I think the questions that we ask show our ability as a salesperson. And we, time and time again, we've talked about the various types of questions, even outside of the why, the how, the what. There are open-ended questions, which we often describe as invitations to conversations. They welcome people in. They
Mhm.
usually don't ask a specific thing. Tell me more about that. And the hearer of that question is going to answer whatever's on their heart. So a salesperson that relies on open-ended questions, I think, is a great salesperson. Closed-ended questions, which are important. How many square feet? How many widgets do you need? Usually a
How does
number.
that impact you,
Yeah, or
right?
or
How does
or
that
yes
impact
no.
you?
A
Yeah.
yes no question, are more closed ended, and then we also get into one thing questions. The beauty of one thing questions. So we not only have the various types, but now, as Bill said, we're going to dig into. I think the heart of the matter is how do these make us feel, and the actual biology and psychology of using the different types of questions and how we can use that to advantage as salespeople.
Right. And those why questions, when we ask somebody why, what it does is it triggers somebody's amygdala, fancy word for almond shaped gland at the base of our brain, which keeps us alive. That's what triggers our fight or flight mechanism. So the amygdala's sole job is to keep us safe, right? So why would the amygdala trigger when we're asking somebody a why question? Well, it's because we make them feel like they're being attacked. Think about that. The same the same gland that keeps us alive if a bear were to attack us and makes us run really fast or hit it with something sharp is triggered when we're asked a why question. Our biology kicks in and we feel that defensive. We feel an attack. And if we're askers of why questions, think about that. We're putting people on defense. We're making people feel attacked when we're trying to get information from them, when we're trying to engage them in a conversation. And we all oftentimes talk, as Matt mentioned earlier, about how do we extend invitations to conversation. Well, apparently, asking a why question that makes somebody feel attacked is not inviting them into anything except a fight.
Yeah, and I hope, Bill, we get to sell a lot, and I can say that you're not a bear attacking anybody in a sales cycle by any means. And one thing that you do really well on the flip side of that, the why questions, it's the what questions, and a couple that come to mind for me are what happens next. One of my favorites is what happens if. Think about
Hmm.
how many times and how versatile we can use that in the sales process. We're in a PDR, proposal draft review. What happens if a price comes in lower?
Hmm.
What happens then? How? How will you navigate that? We're inviting them in. The what,
Hmm.
the how is so very important with open-ended questions. But now we're going a level deeper, and it's just not an open-ended question. It's using the psychology to become even more, in fact, effective.
Hmm. And it's interesting, Matt, when you ask those, what happens if, how will you respond? How will you feel? How
Mhm.
will you, those are very engaging, right? Versus why is price important to you, right? And there's times that I might ask a why question like that because I intentionally, I didn't know it before I went through the certification, but I intentionally ask it because I want to try to create some conflict in the room to make somebody think more deeply, to make somebody, essentially argue with themselves. Where when those what and how questions really can trigger more positive emotions versus the negative ones that come through the why questions. And when we think about that, it's people that tend to have higher levels of emotional intelligence that become more proficient at the how and the what questions when they're engaging people, when they're extending their invitations to conversation, versus those that ask the whys. And the whys, you think about the nature of a why question, oftentimes it's to answer something that went wrong. It's about getting information versus engaging. It's
Mhm.
about serving our needs of the desire of wanting to justify or understand what went wrong or what happened versus trying to understand what's going to happen if. Why questions are oftentimes in the past, right? We're asking about information or we're looking into the past. Hows and whats are futuristic and more strategic for the participant.
And just to bring it back to a broader picture, the how and what's, it's thinking about how are you making the receiver feel
Hmm.
at the end of the day. How comfortable are you making them, as I use how as I describe it.
Hmm.
And so, I think thinking about how the receiver will feel is really important. We talk about making it emotional. A great question: how is this impacting you? How is this impacting your organization? Those are two other great examples of how questions that I think we should be using in every single sales cycle as we evaluate this widget or as we evaluate this service. Got to ask you, what is the cost of making a wrong decision? How will that impact you? How will that impact your organization? Just off the top of my head, I think are great opportunities to not only engage and make people think, but in a comfortable manner versus the why. And you said something the other day that I wrote down that reminds me of a why question in talking and thinking about it in the past. And you said, if we're defending something, we're already losing. If we're in defense mode, and so I don't want to go off on a tangent, but that just came to
Hmm.
my mind with why. And thinking about whys are usually, what happened, what was wrong, why someone acted a certain way, or why there was a response. And, just thinking about that, the defense mechanism that either the receiver is going to have, or if someone throws it back on us, the defense mechanism of making statements and telling and defending versus throwing it back and saying seems like that's important to you. How will it impact you?
Hmm.
What else do I need to know about that? Seems like you have some experience there.
Hmm. It's funny, you're from that meeting when I said if you're defending, you're losing, you're already losing. You're the third person that's brought that up to me this week. And I don't even remember saying it. So sometimes, good things flow through me that I'm not responsible for, thank goodness. It's funny, we are talking about how we get better at asking these questions of others, and transitioning from why questions to how and what questions is actually a baseline, easy exercise to dramatically increase our emotional intelligence. And as we've shared with you in the past, EQ, or our emotional quotient, our emotional intelligence, is a far greater predictor on our success than our IQ or our intellectual capabilities. And for those who have mastered it, they do this naturally. For those of us that are growing and trying to become better, this is one easy way to start to apply to improve the quality of our relationships. Oftentimes our relationships are damaged because of past experiences, right? They're damaged because of things we can't let go of, or things we can't forgive somebody for. And in those relationships, we might be more inclined to ask why questions, because we don't necessarily trust what the individual is going to share with us, or we want to shame and blame them. I don't know about you guys, but guess who I shame and blame the most? Those I love, and most especially me. So I think when we change our self-talk and we move away from why questions about ourselves, and we start looking at our life circumstances and move away from why does this happen to me? Why me? Right? Why me? How many times have we asked that question? When we can move away from why questions with regard to us and move to what can I do to make life better for another? How will I use this situation that's come into my life and do something with it to make life better for another? I had this shared with me a couple weeks ago by a gentleman who said he had this realization when he first discovered he had cancer. And when he learned his cancer diagnosis, his first question he asked, as most of us would do, was, "Why me? Why me? I'm at the prime of my life. I have people that love me. I have children that are growing, and I haven't yet seen my grandchildren. Why me?" And he said, as he laid there, he started to think about, how can I use this situation to make life better for someone else? And he's a consultant, he's a coach like we are. And he started the process of calling his clients one a day and saying, checking on you, see how you're doing. While he was laying tired on his couch, fighting through chemo. What kind of strength does that man have? What kind of emotional intelligence does he have? Uh, he's a wonderful man, and his name's Rob Hillier. I learned a lot from him in a short time, and he's somebody who I came to admire. So, and this is the message from Rob. Rob says, as we learn to ask these what and how questions, we can make life better for others. We can dramatically improve our emotional intelligence, and it all starts with us. When we start asking better questions of ourselves, life gets better, not just for us, but for others. So, can we commit this week? And Matt, can you and I hold each other accountable? Can we commit this week to move away from those why questions, starting with us, extending it to those we love, and ultimately extending it to the world, and start asking better how and whys? And what could be the impact of life, of our life, and the impact we have on others if we're able to do so?
Changing the world one question at a time.
Amen. Let's go do it, buddy. Let's go have a great Tuesday. Let's have a great week. Thank you guys so much for being with us. Always a pleasure. Please share any thoughts you have on this show, any hopes or dreams you have for future episodes that we can help you with. If there's an issue you'd like us to discuss, and we hope you have a great week. Take care. God bless.